Well, hello, happy Sunday. It's Sunday, 28th of September, and I'm just preparing a new course on title AI Security Analysis and Polymorphic and Adaptive Malware. So I thought I'll record this 3 to 5 minute video, just an overview of what's happening currently in the AI malware industry. I have some demos here. Usually when I teach, I explain with demos. So those are all the demos examples from 2025 of different malware that has emerged and changed. So I'm going to only use one fraud GPT for this 3 minute short video. But the course that I'm preparing for, actually, it's much longer, 3 to 4 hour course with significant elements of commercial aspects. Few words about me. I lecture for the University of Oxford. I lecture for the Swiss Cyber Institute. I lecture for Pearson's and O'Reilly, and I'm a researcher for the Alan Turing Institute in London. That's the UK leading institute for the National Institute for AI Security. I have 3,700 citations, more than 100 papers, H index of 24, and I have received some very prestigious fellowships. This year alone, I'm a keynote speaker to two world leading conferences. Now, summary of the course. The longer course would cover foundations of AI malware, what is the AI-based static analysis of malware, how static analysis of malware has changed since the emergence of AI. I'm going to be talking about advanced static malware analysis and the threats from 2025. Then I would introduce dynamic malware analysis and some real-world case studies. So that is an overview of the course, which I will close now. Courses are usually taught by many academics just using PowerPoint slides. So here in this course, I have different types of PowerPoint slides on malware, including what is malware, but I also have VS Code, so I can do demonstrations using VS Code, and I have a whiteboard. So this is the Apple Freeform. That's the software, the native software on Apple. Most people that have Apple devices, iPads, iPhones, MacBooks, they don't even know that Apple has a whiteboard. So they pay extra for other whiteboards, but this is the native Apple whiteboard. It has not been changed since the first version of Apple in 2024, the first time I used this. So it does the job. It's perfectly okay, and those are the four elements that I use in my courses: PowerPoint slides, whiteboards, Visual Studio Code, and actual examples using a browser. But let's look at malware. What is malware? If you think about viruses in the old days, all the viruses were called just all malware was called viruses, but now we have separated into worms, ransomware. Malware refers to the software component of any cyber attack. So it's software that is designed to cause harm. Here you have the Malpedia, where you can trace all the different malware that exists. But in terms of virus, how is virus different from other forms of malware? Virus is a code that is attached to a host file and it requires execution by user. And usually it spreads by infected files or email attachments. That's not the case with worms, for example. One very famous example of malware, hold on, I need to increase this. One very famous example of malware is the I Love You virus. That's a very old virus from 2000, and it was simply a love letter. Why was it so effective? Because everybody likes a love letter, and nobody could resist the click the button, and many people got infected. Worms are different. Worms are standalone malware that is self-replicating over network without any human action. So you see how this is different from the previous description of the virus. The one example is the slammer worm and some advanced worms that we expect. That's why this is highlighted in the red and in yellow, because they have not realized yet, but those are the worms that we are currently worried about, that we are investigating as researchers. Morris 2, it's a version of the Morris worm, which was the very first worm, I think 1988. I have it on the next slide. And we're also looking at how those very old types of malware can be automated using AI and revived into something more dangerous. Worm GPT variants have already emerged. And actually, the example that I'm going to use, it's ChatGPT version without the guardrails. What we're also looking at the moment is plague. Um, in the same way that in the old days, all the malware was called virus, then it's separated into viruses, worms, ransomware, adware, various different forms of malware. Now we're looking at how worms could also be separated into different categories because they don't resemble the definition of a worm anymore. It would be more of a multiple worms getting together as a swarm of worms, and that could be something very different. Here I have an explanation and a definition of the threat from the new forms of malware that they are emerging. The status, we're currently proof of concept, or it's active, or it's real world malware. So that is just the table of the status and highlights of the malware. The front runners in advanced worm concepts in 2025 is Morris 2. That is a proof of concept stage. And then we have the worm GPT variants and plague, which we discussed. One of the most prominent examples of worms is Tachnet, which was advanced persistent threat, basically, against from one nation to a different nation. It's still, although you can find lots of open source, you can actually look at the code on open source. We know that it exists, and we have various databases. I will show you how you can actually access the code, but there is still a little small element of uncertainty who created it, but this high probability that this was a deliberate attack by the British, Americans, and Israelis against the Iranian nuclear power centrifuges. That is the whole expectation of how this virus was developed. Ransomware, it's different form of attack than viruses on worms. Ransomware is basically extraction of money by the hackers in order to pay for their bills. It would encrypt your computer, so you would get a screen like this. That is the exact screen from some previous viruses, and it would request a payment, usually in cryptocurrencies. In 2024, we had three different families that they were prevalent: Logbite, Black Cat, and Clop. In 2025, we have a different group. So we have the Ransom Cub, Killin, and Akira. So those are the groups that are in prevailing in 2025, and I have some demos and examples in the next few slides. So first one, Ransom Hub, which emerged in February 2024 and quickly became one of the most dominant ransomware operations. Event logs were displayed using the extension .293AC3, and you can see here an example of how that extension was detected, and it was installed using Atera, the remote monitoring and management tool. Killin, it's a ransomware as a service, which we have more than 47.3% surge in attacks by June 2025. So this is one of the most active groups during that period. It's also cited as the most significant and active ransomware families across 2024 and 2025. This is a screenshot of how it looks. It's a ransomware as a service, so it's an affiliate panel and uses double extortion tactics usually when harvested data is exfiltrated and then threatened for publication on the group DLS, which is hosted on Tor, the dark web, basically. So Killin has examples of written in the Golang and in the Rust programming languages, so it's compatible with various operating systems and is highly customizable. This last sentence is probably the most interesting thing that many people don't realize, and most of the questions that they got asked is how successful are ransomware attacks, since we have ransomware as a service, and you can imagine that it's very successful. So Killin affiliates, where this is reported by Killin themselves, were able to earn 80% of the ransomware payments of USD if it's 3 million or less, and even higher, 85% of the payments that was above that figure. So 80 and 85%, it's a significant success rate. We must agree that ransomware is becoming a problem because it's a form of employment in a way. Hackers can earn money. If you're building other types of viruses, you won't necessarily get payment unless it's a zero-day exploit that you can sell on dark web, on Tor. Akira or SafePlay. Akira was gained attention for its sophisticated techniques of disabling Microsoft Defender using vulnerable drivers. So in the first half of 2025, SafePlay, along with Killin and Akira, ranked among the top ransomware groups by incident volume. This is the screenshot of Akira. So it's an Onion Dark web name, and the source is from X-Force Dark Web Research. Now here we can look at small explanation how does it work. Akira is engaged in bring your own vulnerable driver attack using initial access to drop two drives, one of which is legitimate. The first driver is a legitimate driver for throttle setup, and this is a Windows-based performance tuning and monitoring utility preliminary designed for Intel CPUs, and it's often used to override CPU throttling mechanisms and improve performance. The second driver here is registered as a service, but when executed, it modifies the disable anti-spyware settings on Windows Defender within the system registry. So according to Sonic Wall, the exploit is an end-day vulnerability. So it's not a zero-day vulnerability because it has a CV associated with it. It's disclosed and documented, and it's not a zero-day or unknown vulnerability. So this is, in a nutshell, the short explanation of how the course would operate. And now let's look at the whiteboard. The whiteboard, usually it's when I do use these diagrams to explain very difficult concepts, and I draw using my pen on the iPad. Let's look at just one example that is from a report. This is from September 18, 2025, so it's a very recent example. And Fraud GPT is the future of cybercrime, because Fraud GPT is basically like ChatGPT, but without the guardrails. So if you ask Fraud GPT to create a virus, it will create a virus. And in one famous example of it's not actually proof of concept, it's very much applied in the hacking sector, is that even people with very little knowledge about coding or hacking, those are people that until 5 years ago, they were not considered as any form of threat to society or to the systems. Now they have access to nation level tools. So basically, Fraud GPT is a very advanced form of creating malware, and to increase the efficiency, usually junior hacker, so to call them, they would go on the dark web and buy a vulnerability that is a zero-day vulnerability, not necessarily a very expensive one. And then they'll ask Fraud GPT to create a malware based on that vulnerability, and in 85 to 90%, it would actually create an effective virus. So you see that the malware design is being streamlined, and people with very little knowledge have access to very powerful tools. Actually, one of the main concerns is that many of these hackers are just children, youngsters, that they would get into deep trouble because they have no control over the tools that they're using. But we also don't have control over stopping many of those tools. Those are on the dark web. The same like we cannot stop criminal activities like drugs, rape, murder. We cannot stop this as well. So we have to build defenses, and my course is going to be on that. You have to register and listen to the course. Hopefully I'll see you in the next videos or in some of the courses that I'm teaching.